Krishna यस्य देवामृत्विजं होतारं रत्नदातरम् अग्निः पूर्वेभिर्षिभिर्यो नूतनेरुत सदेवाय वक्ष्यति अग्निनारयिमश्नवत् कोशमेव दिवे दिवे ऋषसंवीरवत्तमम् आग्नेयं यज्ञमध्वरम् विश्वतः परिभूयसि सरिद्देवेषु गच्छति अग्निर्होताग्रविक्रतुः सत्यश्चित्रशवस्तवः देवो देवेभिरागमत् यदङ्गनाशुषे त्वमग्ने भद्रं करिष्यसि तदेतत्सत्यमन्दिरः उपत्वाने दिवे दिवे दोषावस्तरदियावरं नमो मरन्त एमसि राजन्तमध्वराणां गोपामृतस्य दीदिनं वर्धमानं स्वेदवे।
Hari Om, Namaskar. I am Shobhana Radhakrishna. Welcome to the Gandhi Katha this evening. Today I began with a bhajan from Kabir Das ji. Today is Kabir Das Jayanti, and we sang the favorite bhajan of Mahatma Gandhi, Vaishnava Janato, and followed by a prayer to fire God, to lead us on the straight path of renunciation. I express my deepest gratitude to Ambassador Voraji, to Srimati Das ji, Director of Rabindranath Tagore Indian Culture Center, and to all of you who have joined today on this evening to listen to my Gandhi Katha. It seems the world has halted due to the impact of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, with the message that we may have stopped, but we are not afraid. The Embassy of India in Mexico is hosting this Gandhi Katha this evening on the occasion of the UN World Environment Day, during this coronavirus pandemic, and on the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. I extend my warm wishes to the people of Mexico and stand in solidarity with them in this common fight against COVID-19 pandemic, and I am confident that our friendly ties and the reverence for Mahatma Gandhi will further strengthen our relationship now and in the post-pandemic world. Last year, I visited 33 countries and gave 148 Gandhi Kathas and lectures as part of Gandhi 150 commemoration. Mahatma Gandhi is the most revered Indian personality in Mexico. So I wanted to visit Mexico this year, as I was very keen to meet all of you. Gandhiji's eternal teachings of the values of truth, non-violence and purity of means resonate throughout Mexico. I'm happy to learn that there are statues of Mahatma Gandhi in Mexico City and schools are named after Mahatma Gandhi. My Gandhi Katha is based on the centuries-old Indian traditional oral tradition of Katha with bhajans and hymns. In today's Gandhi Katha, Srimati Swati Bhagat and Shri Deepak Kalra are accompanying me in singing. The technical support and the PowerPoint presentation is by Dr. Ravi Chopra. The lyrics of the Gandhi Katha dhun or hymns in Hindi are composed by late Shri Narayan Desai ji. I am very grateful to all of them. Gandhi ji was the first environmentalist, and with his stunning premonition and knowledge, he had declared more than a century ago that the earth has enough for man's needs but not for man's greed. He had already predicted and actually warned the world leaders that greed will be the main reason for environmental degradation and the ecological crisis that we are in right now. He had also said that the earth, the air, the land and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers but on loan from our children. So we'll have to hand it over to them as it was handed over to us. And look what we have done to our biodiversity. Last year, on 2nd October, I was invited to deliver the keynote address at the United Nations Regional Office in Vienna and release the stamp brought out by the UN Postal Department with that quote. Gandhiji had recognized the need for conservation and preservation way before the dangers of climate change had preoccupied the world. As I said, he was the original thinker who clearly understood the reality of misuse and abuse of the global commons. According to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's life was an epic of faith and endeavor. His faith was in truth, the ultimate reality of truth, and he endeavored to attain it through non-violence throughout his life till the very last breath. Gandhiji's adherence to truth, non-violence and purity of means has inspired me to give Gandhi Katha so that people could put their hearts into understanding Gandhiji and get inspired to learn from his extraordinary spiritual life, revolutionary thoughts and actions of his lifelong service to humanity against all forms of injustice. Gandhiji used to remain positive under all the circumstances, and that was his main trait. He had faced many challenges in his life. As the world is reeling under the impact of coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic and everyone is affected, it is important to face this challenge humbly and with reverence to the virus, with reverence and gratitude and surrender to the divine forces that are beyond our control, fearlessly, intelligently, and with a positive outlook towards life. The more positive we are, we the ordinary people will remain, the sooner we'll be able to take this situation in an auspicious direction. For Gandhiji, this was his way of life. In all his ashrams or hermitages, Mahatma Gandhi used to begin and end his days with prayers. These prayers were from all the religions of the world, Sarva Dharma Prarthana, that used to take place at 4 a.m. and 7 p.m. under the open sky. Gandhiji said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth. Our ancient scripture, Rig Veda, confirms it, saying, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. There is only one truth, or true being, and learned people call it by many names. This verse is reminding us that there are many ways, many paths which lead to God. And therefore Gandhiji had said that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence, and must have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions. All of Gandhiji's friends were from different religions, from around the world. One of the legacies that he has left for the humanity is non-violent conflict resolution through interfaith dialogue, inter-religious dialogues. Therefore, we will also begin today with the Sanskrit prayer Asato Ma Sadgamaya, which asks God to lead us from untruth to truth, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. This prayer during these challenging times of coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic is for the well-being and safety of every living being, so that we can live in harmony with Mother Nature. May better sense prevail. The scientists believe that our planet has already entered into a new epoch called Anthropocene, the age of humans. It is based on the fact that humans today have the most dominant influence on environment and climate. We are literally changing the face of Earth, and one of the ways we are doing it is by decimating other species present in the biodiversity. A century ago, as I said earlier, Gandhiji had cautioned us, saying what we are doing to the forests of the world is but a minor reflection of what we are doing to ourselves and to one another. It seems abundantly clear that our treatment of nature is directly affecting our karma, or good or bad luck, viewed as resulting from our actions. In the course of just a few months, however, over 7 billion people's lives changed for the worse. In January, the world caught the news of a virus, a new variant of coronavirus COVID-19, and a family of viruses that has been with us for over thousands of years. Yet, at no point did our scientists suggest, nor any public official report, that this very virus will threaten the survival of humans and much other life on the planet in the coming years. Gandhiji's entire life gives us answers to the complex environmental problems. The environmental problems are the result of human greed, and Gandhiji always opposed it strongly, and the consumer-driven economy more than a century ago. Today, the theme of the UN World Environment Day is of protection, restoration, and conservation of biodiversity and sustainability. So Mahatma Gandhi stands before us as the role model who had practiced what he had preached. He always advocated a simple lifestyle of voluntary self-control, inclusive development, and need-based economic system. So we will sing a dhun in Hindi which explains his philosophy of being fearless in following truth and non-violence, opposing injustice through non-violent resistance or satyagraha. The dhun is called Lagire Lagan.
Lagire lagan, lagire lagan, satya ahimsa mein man mera magan, satya ahimsa mein man mera magan, lagire lagan, satya ahimsa mein man mera magan, satya ahimsa mein man mera magan. अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा, सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा, सर्व प्रकार के भयमोचन, सर्व प्रकार के भयमोचन, सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन, लागे लगन, लागे लगन, सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन, सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन।
Mahatma Gandhi is a symbol of peace and non-violence to the whole world. The whole world knows Mahatma Gandhi as the political leader and the revolutionary of an extraordinary type. That he was also a great thinker and a saintly figure who practiced spiritual lifestyle is also quite well known in the world. It is also widely known that he was a humanist and pacifist of international repute. His birth anniversary on 2nd October is celebrated as the UN International Day of Non-Violence. His legacies are non-violent movements or satyagraha, interfaith dialogue for non-violent conflict resolution, transparency and openness, and his environmental credo. But very few people know that he was the first environmentalist too, who lived according to his environmental credo much before the world was occupied with the concerns of ecological crisis and environmental degradation. However, it may seem that the concern for environment has assumed importance only in the recent years. It is not so. From time immemorial, we have been worshippers of nature, Prakriti Pujaka. The Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, Sutras and other sacred texts of the wisdom tradition of our civilization also mentions the worship of the divine nature. Millions in India still recite Sanskrit mantras daily to revere their rivers, mountains, trees, plants, animals and Mother Earth, and have continued throughout these century-old tradition till this day. We see the same stream of thought and action flowing in Mahatma Gandhi's life, as it had flown in the lives of great teachers and seers of the world who had come before him. And that is why he had said, I have nothing new to teach. Truth and non-violence are as old as mountains. I have merely applied it in the newer fields. He says, I need no inspiration other than nature's. She has never failed me as yet. She mystifies me, bewilders me, and sends me into ecstasy. So, from 1904 itself, when Barrister Mohandas Gandhi read John Ruskin's book called Unto This Last, he transformed his life from a posh life in Durban of a barrister to a life where he lived with the community with voluntary poverty, bread labor, and voluntary self-control. In 1909, Mahatma Gandhi had expressed his concern about the society in existence in his book Hind Swaraj, written with an internal inspiration to give a message to the world. In Hind Swaraj, there is an accusation against colonization, rapid industrialization, and relentless consumerism, but there is also an announcement about the vision for the future, about the kind of society that should be established. Gandhiji was not willing to accept the absence of concern for one's soul. He believed that infinite consumptions are not appeased by even more consumption. In order to reduce the effect of consumption, man has to exercise self-control. In Hind Swaraj, he also dealt with purity of means, and a very important issue in his definition of Swaraj. Swaraj for him was rule over self, control over self, and that's exactly what we need to do now and post-pandemic period. Exactly 111 years ago, in Hind Swaraj, the last sentence that Gandhiji had written, that my whole life is dedicated to this cause. So now there will be a hymn in Hindi explaining his definition of truth, which is very simple. Utter as you think and act as you utter. That means there should be harmony between your thought, your words, and your deeds. Then only there will be no difference between what you say and what you do. Gandhiji was one of the leaders in whose life there was no difference between what he said and what he did. And we also see the life of excellence, or yoga karmasu kaushalam, through the union of dhyana yoga, karma yoga, and bhakti yoga. So the dhun is in Hindi, man vani karma se सत्य ही तू बोल.
मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल. मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल. जीवन में मंगल के द्वार तू खोल. जीवन में मंगल के द्वार तू खोल. ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान. ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान. सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान. सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान. मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल. मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल. जीवन में मंगल के द्वार तू खोल. जीवन में मंगल के द्वार तू खोल. ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान. ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान. सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान. सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान.
Gandhiji called himself a practical idealist. From his childhood, he had a habit of whatever he read, whatever he saw, or whatever he heard. If he liked it, he immediately started practicing on that. Waiting was no option for him. He had said that an ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching. So the environmental credo of this practical idealist is seen in the non-violent face-to-face society in his ashrams. As I said, in 1904, he had set up his first basavat or settlement called Phoenix Settlement and started leading a life of voluntary self-control. And he had included Leo Tolstoy's term of bread labor also. He was impressed. One of the mentors that Gandhiji had, other than Kavi Raichand Bhai, whom he had met in India and from whom he learnt non-attachment, anasakti. The second one was John Ruskin's, and the third one was Leo Tolstoy, who had influenced him through his book called The Kingdom of God is Within You. And they continued their correspondence. They never met each other, but the influence is very, very widely seen in Gandhiji, and he mentions and he pays his respects to all these three mentors. Gandhiji established 4 ashrams in his lifetime. 2 in South Africa called the Phoenix Settlement and Tolstoy Farm. And for a short while he was in Kochrab Ashram when he came to India in 1915. But on 17th June 1917, he established the Sabarmati Ashram or Satyagraha Ashram, and many of you would have visited that ashram. So in 1936, he established the Sevagram Ashram and Kasturba Gandhi, and he lived like the common villagers of India in poverty from 1936 onwards up to 1944. Of course, in 42, Kasturba Gandhi had passed away in Aga Khan jail. I'm happy to inform you that I was born in Sevagram Ashram, established by Gandhiji. And I've been inspired by Gandhiji from my childhood. My father was also inspired by Gandhiji from his student days, joined the freedom struggle and went to jail also. And later on, when he came to the ashram, he took on the work, constructive activities that Gandhiji had started there. And even after Gandhiji passed away, for the next 5 to 6 decades, he and all of us continued to walk on the path shown by Gandhiji. That path was not only shown to our family, it is available for humanity to walk on it, because Gandhiji says that my life is my message. So what I am telling you today is based on what my father has told me, my own experience and understanding of Mahatma Gandhi, who has inspired a generation of people who have followed the path and continue to do so, about whom Albert Einstein had said that generations to come will scarce believe that such a one like this in flesh and blood ever walked on this earth. And I belong to that generation. And Gandhiji's blood flows in my veins as it flows in all the veins of all of you. My Chaitanya, your Chaitanya, Gandhiji's Chaitanya, and Chaitanya of this universe, the Mother Earth, is after all one and the same. We all belong to the same human family, and we are all interconnected and interdependent, and all of us have only one home, Mother Earth. So Mahatma Gandhi is a model for simple living and living in harmony with nature. His entire life can be seen as a mythological treatise. This one life in which every minute thought, emotion, words and act function like the ecosystem of being in harmony. There was no difference between what he said and what he did. There was complete transparency and openness which was one of his traits. Gandhiji was a practitioner and an ardent advocate of vegetarianism. He experimented with nature cure. He was a scientist, all the time experimenting on himself, and his autobiography is known as The Story of My Experiments with Truth, which is the cheapest inspirational book available in the world. And he lived a very frugal life in harmony with the biodiversity of reusing and recycling resources and using minimum of resources. Even when he took water for a bath, he took very little water. He said, this water is for everybody. I should take only as much as I need. Simple living was a model for sustainable economies, and Gandhiji demonstrated it in his ashram life, which was an example of minimalistic living, of self-reliance, discipline, bread labor, voluntary self-control, adhering to 11 observances or Ekadasha Vrata. These were the rules set by Gandhiji for the ashram inmates, and any rule that is followed for the lifetime becomes an observance. Coupled with that, punctuality, discipline, promptness, selflessness, a life of non-attachment and non-possession, being ever vigilant, engaging in constructive activities, using every minute of time absolutely efficiently, because as all of us know, time is the only non-renewable resource that all of us have. Once the time goes away, it never comes back. And while it seems as if everything has come to a standstill during the lockdown, but the time has continued to tick, and we are continuing to walk in our journey towards that beautiful end. So the ashram life was a life of sharing and caring, sharing virtues and vices, joys and sorrows, and festivals and festivities. One of the traits of Mahatma Gandhi was that he was able to rise above his personal joys and sorrows and share people's happiness and sorrows by being with them and caring for them. There used to be 4 community activities in the ashram, and I have grown up taking part in those community activities. The first one was community prayer. The second one was community cleanliness and sanitation and hygiene practices that involved outer and inner cleaning also, eating together. And the 4th community activity was community spinning, and that's what I was doing in the beginning. I was spinning on the takli, or I also learned to spin on the charkha from the age of 5 years. So I continue to spin, I continue to make my own clothes. The spinning was in the spirit of yajna or sacrifice, to become one with the poorest of the poor Indians and also to control the wants. He called for using Swadeshi, to use only as much as one needs by being self-sufficient in terms of clothing and food. Ashram life was the laboratory of Mahatma Gandhi to prepare satyagrahis out of ordinary people, ready to sacrifice their lives in the non-violent struggle for setting the motherland free from the British colonial regime, and participate in the constructive programs for establishing the dignity of the poorest of the poor and get them ready to participate in satyagraha. Through the Ekadasha Vrata, or the 11 observances that I was talking about, Gandhiji turned the individual virtues into societal values as a set of 11 rules, and they were non-violence, truth, celibacy, non-stealing, non-possession, fearlessness, control of the palate, bread labor, equality of religion, communal harmony, and removal of untouchability. The rest of the 5, the beginning, the 5 are called Mahavratas in the Vedic literature. They are called Pancha Yamas by Maharishi Patanjali. Jainas call them Panchamahayama. Buddhists call it Panchashila. They are accepted in the cardinal principles of Christianity. Almost all the religions of the world accept these 5 observances. To that, Gandhiji had added 2 more auxiliary vratas, and looking at the condition of India in 1950, he had added 4 more, taking it to 11 observances. So Gandhiji has given 3 gifts to humanity, and about one people know a lot. That's called Satyagraha. The second one people know a little about, is constructive activities, and about the third one, Ekadasha Vrata, very few people know. That was the life of voluntary self-control, which most of the ashramites are following till today. Most of the people who are know about it, inspired by it, also follow that, and Gandhiji remains the inspiration for minimalistic living and living in harmony with nature. He lived his life according to the central messages of the Bhagavad Gita, selflessly, without attachment and possession. Lord Krishna says in chapter 11 of the Bhagavad Gita in verse 55, Mat karma krun mat paramo, mat bhaktah sangavarjitah, nirvairah sarvabhuteshu, yah sammameti pandava. Those who perform all their duties for my sake, who depend upon me and are devoted to me, who are free from attachment and are without malice towards all beings. They are thinking of God, thinking that God resides in the heart of all beings, and that's why they feel oneness with everyone. They see all actions stemming out from God Almighty, so they forgive even their wrongdoers. And we see all these traits in Mahatma Gandhi's life. The first verse from the Ishopanishad was sung, recited in the ashram prayers, and that is Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagatyan Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha Ma Gridha Kasya Svidhanam. That everything in this universe belongs to God, and He is omnipresent and owns the universe, and everything belongs to Him. Nothing really belongs to us. Enjoy the objects of the world in an attitude of perfect non-attachment, taking to the extent what is necessary for us, and leave the rest for others in the society. Never ever crave the position of others. Nothing belongs to you. So this, a Christian priest had asked Gandhi to tell him the essence of the Indian civil culture in 3 words, to which Gandhi ji had said, renounce and rejoice. And this is what we are going to sing in the next dhun, called Nayah Tera, Nayah Mera, Ishwar ka hi Raj hai, that God is omnipresent and He owns everything.
Nayah Tera, Nayah Mera, Nayah Tera, Nayah Mera, Ishwar ka Raj hai, Ishwar ka Raj hai, Ishwar ka jai, Ishwar ka bhai, Ishwar ka jai, Ishwar ka bhai, Ishwar
that as a couple, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi had contributed immensely 123 years ago to public health and service of humanity during outbreaks of diseases, war and pandemic. And Gandhiji from his childhood wanted to become a doctor from his young age, but he became a barrister instead because somebody said that his late father would not have wanted the boy from a Vaishnava family to go into dissection of bodies, etc. So he became a barrister. But the inner calling or the swadharma of serving others always stayed in him. He started by serving his father, who was on a sick bed for a very long time, and he expanded that swadharma into serving all others. So when he got a chance in 1893 in South Africa, he took training in Cottage Hospital as a nurse, and he worked and looked after the patients. So Gandhiji was always interested in health and well-being of others, and was very, very vigilant about his own health as well as others. He said that our lifestyle should be such that it should not let any disease come anywhere near us, and every person is responsible for looking after their body, mind and spirit impeccably in order for keeping healthy physically, mentally and spiritually. We should have perfect understanding of our bodies, which is made up of 5 elements that are found in the nature, and that's what has been told by our ancient seers and rishis of India. And those 5 elements are water, air, fire, earth and space or ether. For the wellness of our bodies, the balance and harmony between these 5 elements are necessary. The first element, air, which is all pervasive and surrounds us totally, without which we cannot live. About that, Gandhiji said that people do not know how to breathe properly, and therefore they should be taught the breathing exercises, they should be taught pranayama, and they should be taught how to keep the respiratory tract clean, and as much as possible they should sleep in the open, they should keep the rooms ventilated. So in a speech in Ahmedabad in 1918, he had said that air, water and grain are the 3 chief kinds of food. Air is free for all, and if it pollutes, it harms our health. Doctors say that bad air is more harmful than bad water. Inhalation of bad air is harmful by itself, and this is the reason we sometimes need change of air. Our ancient Indian scriptures also teach us man evam manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoha bandhaya vishayasaktam muktam nirvishayo smritah. For man, the mind is the cause of bondage, and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage, and the mind detached from the sense objects is the cause of liberation. This is the second verse from the Amrit Bindu Upanishad, which is part of the Atharva Veda, and that's how we have got our system of Ayurveda, which most of us follow and which our grandmothers have been telling us using it at home. The healthy crux of Gandhiji's teachings are early rising, nature cure, disciplined life, fasting, frugal diet, silence, positive thinking, bread labor or manual, shramadana, vegetarianism, compassion, forgiveness, prayer, meditation, cleanliness and sanitation, and you can add many more to that. For the benefit of readers of the Indian opinion in South Africa, around the year 1906, Gandhiji had written some articles with the heading Guide to Health, and later on he published it into a booklet, but it became very popular in India, and the copies were not available. So when he was imprisoned in 1942 during the Quit India movement in Aga Khan Palace, he had some time and he started writing Key to Health, and that book was translated into several Indian language, and English translation also appeared. That reached the West and was translated in many European languages. The result was that that book became the most popular of my writing. Gandhi says that I have never been able to understand the reason for its popularity. So people who have not read Key to Health may well be interested in reading it. So he says that I had written the articles casually and I had not attached much importance to them. But perhaps the reason for the popularity is because I have looked at the problem of health from a novel point of view, somewhat different from the orthodox methods adopted by doctors and Vaidyas or traditional health practitioners. So he said that once people read it and they experiment with that, use it, then he said, I'm giving it a new name now. It's called Key to Health. Anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has found the real key to unlock the gates leading him to health. He will not need to knock at the doors of doctors or Vaidyas from day to day. So coronavirus COVID-19 is the global pandemic of our times, but Spanish flu remains the deadliest in modern history, and that came in 1918, killing at least 50 million people and infecting more than 500 million. The 1918 H1N1 virus played a critical role in altering the course of Indian history, and at that time Gandhiji was in Kheda spearheading the non-violent movement or Andolan by the farmers, peanut farmers, and he felt very sick and was exhausted by extreme work that he was doing. So he came back to the ashram and he remained bedridden for over 5-6 months. But at that time, entire world was engulfed by the pandemic, Spanish flu influenza pandemic of 1918. So Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi opened their ashram as a quarantine center, took care of the patients, took care of social distancing, gave them proper diet to boost up their immunities, looked after their families, counseled them, and therefore they interacted with them so that their physical, mental and spiritual health could be looked after. They gave information about taking care of each other during the time of during the time of Spanish influenza pandemic. So on November 10th, 1918, Gandhiji had said, our ancestors could build such tough bodies in the past, but today we are reduced to a state of miserable weakness and are easily infected by noxious germs moving about in the air. There is one and only one really effective way by which we can save ourselves from them even in our present broken state of health. That way is the way of self-restraint or sanyam and of imposing limits to our act. Just like in the case of COVID-19 in 2020, there was no known medicine available to treat Spanish flu. The world of medical science was in a nascent stage back then. Developing a vaccine against the Spanish flu was out of question. The first flu vaccine came on the scene only in 1940. The first antibiotic medicine came in 1928, years after Spanish flu had ravaged the human population. So it was social distancing, wearing masks and quarantine that had saved the world, particularly the developed ones back then, and that is what Gandhiji also advised people to do, and it is from them, that Gandhiji, that we have to learn to do that. And of course the doctors are saying the same thing, scientists are saying the same thing, our government is saying the same thing. So it is our duty now to do our bit by protecting ourselves as well as protecting others, because the coronavirus this time is much more dangerous and it is very perfectly able to infect so many other people. So Kasturba Gandhi and Gandhiji later on in all the calamities like droughts and earthquake and floods etc. remained in the front line to help people. So this was a very unique combination of these two couple who worked as frontline workers, and it is time for us to also learn. Gandhiji called himself the commander-in-chief of the non-violent army, and he was always first to go to any potentially dangerous situation, and this is one of his traits, and that trait, another trait that he had, that he treated all work as God-given work and did all his work with equal reverence, with an attitude of yajna or sacrifice. We need to learn from Gandhiji's spiritual lifestyle and his environmental credo in these times of coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic for coping up physically, mentally and spiritually by living in harmony with nature, now also as well as in the future. Instead of reinventing a new lifestyle, we just have to get inspired to take actions from the life of Mahatma Gandhi and make the necessary changes in thought, words and our conduct. And this is the future that coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic is pointing out to us. If we observe carefully, many lessons are very clear, but some lessons are still unknown and surrounding us in uncertainty. This uncertainty is causing a lot of mental stress, anxiety, existential crisis, fear of extinction, fear of death, and the mass psychology of living in depression and grief is pointing towards this fact. We are as if collectively grieving for the loss of our known lifestyle. Now it has all changed. However, at a deeper level, if we look at it carefully, the wellness of humans consists in living in harmony with Mother Nature, because we are dependent on nature for our mere existence. We need to live with the rhythm of the nature, as we see it functions in absolute silence and with a very routine life, in a very rhythmic cycle. So we have to learn that we have to take care of ourselves and of all the creations of this biodiversity. There is no alternative to this lifestyle at all. For all of us at least, there is no way other than the standard prevention and taking care of oneself and the others. The community and mutual support is essential, and so is the happiness and welfare of others for having access to pure air, water and food. We have to say no to injustice, intolerance, violence and war, and must live in peace, brotherhood, interdependence, harmony with compassion and oneness. Any thought or conduct in the opposite direction or running after money, wealth, position and power is certain to bring self-annihilation. Global warming has brought so many changes, and the solution to these problems have to be global only. So waging wars, indulging in hatred, terrorism, greed, capturing, spreading unrest are all useless, as all of us, even those one hates, are the victims of the climate threat and of coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. In our civilization, our ancient seers have looked upon us as Vishwamanavaha and said that the world is one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We live in harmony with our family, just like that. We are all part of the same human family and irrevocably interconnected and interdependent, and only have one home, this Mother Earth. If still we return to the normal standard of finding happiness by chasing money, power, position and wealth, lifelong consumerism, then COVID-19 has given the wake-up call. This kind of lifestyle of empty consumerism and mass distractions has only increased the difference between the rich and the poor, created the huge carbon print, increased the misery of the invisible poor masses, till we do not get out of the narrow-mindedness and selfishness of considering about only ourselves and our need, looking at ourselves only, till then will be caught in this trap. But now that everything has changed, intolerance, selfishness, callousness and indolence will not do any longer. We have to strive for excellence within whatever is available. So remember, yoga karma kaushalam. We have to do everything in perfection and in an excellence, because everyone is affected by the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, irrespective of stature, age and health. So we have to extend helping hands to everybody, take care of our elders, of our family, of our neighbors, of our society, of our nation, of our planet Earth, and we as Vishwamanava have to become global citizens, take the responsibility and act with that responsibility to become role models for the next generation. And that is the obligatory duty that Bhagavad Gita teaches us. That is our Swadharma. Before we are born, our family was there, our country was there, our society was there, our neighbors were there, our planet Earth was there. So our responsibility, the obligatory duty on Niyatam Karma is to serve others. Lord Krishna says in the verse 21 of the 3rd chapter, Yad yad acharati shreshthas tat tat evetaro jana sa evam pramanam kurute lokastat anuvartate. Whatever the best doeth, that the lower kind of people put into practice. The standard he creates, the people follow, and Gandhiji has already created the standard. I will end today's Gandhi Katha by acknowledging my grateful thanks to the Ambassador Moraji, to Srimati Dasji, and to the people of Mexico, and to everyone who has joined me online in this evening. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I will end this Gandhi Katha by the hymn Lead Kindly Light.
Lead kindly.